Hi, good afternoon. This is John Darren. This is part of our ongoing blog and podcast series concerning Executive Life Insurance Company of New York, also known as ELNY. In previous podcasts, Mark Wallstrom and I discussed, way before the liquidation proceedings, we discussed the problems with ELNY that have been going on for over 20 years. In December, a number of annuitants, specifically I think approximately 1,500, were given notices saying that their structured settlements were going to have shortfalls of a variety of different percentages. This came out of the blue for many, despite the fact that Mark Wallstrom and Pat Hindert had written a variety of different podcasts. But the reality of it is you have people facing shortfalls, and that's not a good thing. And I'd like to, face this thing head on from the standpoint of understanding, for historical significance, why these people are in the situation that they're in. Now, this may seem a little harsh, being somebody that's in the structured settlement business, but I also want to clarify that I entered the structured settlement business after ELNY stopped selling structured settlement annuities. I never placed any ELNY structured settlements, so I think I come from a clean perspective, at least in observations. In 1983, I entered the life insurance business as an agent of Northwestern Mutual Life. I sold whole life insurance, disability insurance, and other financial products, and I competed with Executive Life. Sometimes successfully, more often than not successfully, but sometimes I lost out because they had great rates. But just having great rates, is that a reason to buy life insurance? Is that the reason to buy auto insurance or long-term care insurance or anything else? The reality of it is, as consumers, when we're buying other commodities, we often think about price. But what happened in the 1980s, when Executive Life was in its heyday, is that, in my personal opinion, there were people that were buying just based on price. Not only that, there were people that were buying or putting all of their eggs in one basket. Now, that's the point that I really want to get to. We're going to have a series of podcasts, I've actually invited a number of ELNY victims to come on the show and to be interviewed. And the purpose of it is to understand what the sales process was like many years ago, back in the 80s. How did they come to having all their eggs and their entire financial future, people with catastrophic injuries, have all their eggs in the ELNY basket? Something must have happened. Was it their attorney? Was it the structured settlement broker? Or was it somebody just being blinded by interest rates? Now, I've spoken to a number of people. Some of them said that, one person said that my attorney told me that there's a better chance of the sun not shining than ELNY not paying. Now, the attorney in that particular circumstance, I'm sure doesn't have errors and omissions coverage. I'm sure it's beyond the statute of limitations, although I'll let the legal professionals decide whether that's the case. But what kind of an irresponsible statement is that to make, that there's more than chance of the sun not shining than ELNY not paying? I wonder what that particular attorney is thinking now. But the reality of it is, let's focus on all the eggs in one basket. The concept of putting all your eggs in one basket has been around since approximately the 1650s, according to research that I've done. So this is not something that's new. It's not something that just happened. It's an old adage that sometimes people forget. And in this particular situation, perhaps they did. But were there red flags out there? I think that there were. And let me tell you about those red flags. In 1982, a company called Baldwin United was one of the largest sellers of annuities in the United States. Baldwin United had financial problems, and Baldwin United was one of the biggest annuity failures in the United States. That was 1982. At the same time, Executive Life of New York was writing structured annuities. In 1983, Charter National had a very similar type of a problem. Charter National was one of the largest sellers of regular annuities, not structured annuities, but regular annuities. They had problems, okay? And it was big news. This was not something that was in like a page 6 fold in small print. This was like big, big news. This is something that anybody who read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Post, or any small backcountry newspaper. This is something that was out there because, this was something that was just big news. So how could you put all your eggs in one basket when the subject of annuities was in the news with these two major players? They were small companies. These were not the New York Lifes or the Northwestern Mutuals, but they were small companies that people went into to buy these high interest rates with companies that did not have long histories. I just don't get it, okay, because the red flags are there. Now let's talk more about executive life. Up until the early 80s in New York State, you could only have a certain small percentage of junk bonds in your portfolio. Sometime in the early 80s, there was a change in the law that allowed there to be a much greater percentage. The qualified assignment company, First Executive, that took on the qualified assignments for executive life structured settlements, at its peak had 40% of its assets in junk bonds. Yet people were being put into these things, all their eggs in one basket into these particular items. Now, into the structured annuities with executive life of New York. How could somebody who is paying attention to their client's welfare, whether you are a personal injury attorney or you are a financial advisor, how could you put all their eggs into one basket, having this information, knowing the red flags? You're a financial professional, you read the Wall Street Journal, you have an insurance license. There's no way that you can claim that you were ignorant about this. How could you put somebody or recommend somebody have all their eggs in one basket? I can tell you that there's only, I don't know what other explanation there is than that there was some negligence on behalf of some people, that people were, I can't say that people could be ignorant because it was all over the news, but I'm open to any other type of explanation. But the fact of the matter is that there are people that were placed into these, whether they did it, the parents, if it was kids who were neurologically impaired, their parents made decisions. If they're lawyers, some people said their lawyers they'd put it in the hands of their lawyers and the lawyers made decisions. The statute of limitations have run. We're not going to name names here. But the one major lesson that comes from this is that when you're working and you have to look, when you're working with people who are physically injured, have catastrophic injuries, you have to not put all their eggs in one basket. You have to look at diversification. You have to look at potential red flags and acknowledge them, and you have to stay on top of current events. I think there's going to be more discussion on this. I really look forward to having and bringing to you interviews with ELNY victims who have been affected by this, so that we can use this and record purely for historical significance, what is going on. I am not going to get involved in the legal aspects of this. I'm looking at it purely as an educational piece here, because there are future generations of people who should be putting their money into structured settlements, who have to understand what happened with ELNY and how this ELNY situation cannot be allowed to happen again and should not happen again. Thank you. I'm John Darrer. Have a great day.